What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Thee CrazyFaceUno Podcast, where everyone has a story and everyone's story matters. What's your story? If you'd like to support the show and help us tell more stories like the one you're about to hear, please visit CrazyFaceUno.com today. There you can purchase items from our online store or donate. As always, I'm your host, Shane McNeely, and boy, are you in for a treat today. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my guest today. Please welcome Tom Nero. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, thanks, Shane. What a great introduction.
Yeah, thanks, man. I have been perfecting it over the months here and time, and I've got it down pretty decently now, I would say.
Yeah, it's a big hype up.
Oh, yeah. It'll be fun. You and I are old high school friends. Probably got to know each other best because of wrestling, I would say.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say? I think that's probably, small town, so we knew each other. It wasn't like we were strangers, but I feel like we got to know each other a little bit better through the old wrestling days.
I would definitely say that would be you were a grade below me in high school.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I was, one grade below you. I used to think I was tough and like to pick on you, and you were generous enough to swat me away like a little fly, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Some things will never change. I'm still gonna pick on you, Tom. Just can't get away from me.
Yeah, for context, you were what weight class were you?
Like 119, 112 freshman year, 119, 125, so
yeah, and I was heavyweight. I was
You were I
was about
stout
245,
guy,
250 in junior high, and that never changed. So
yeah, and you were like, I feel like when people think of heavyweights, it's not you. You're like the fit. You're like super fit. You were like the muscle guy, the guy that everybody looked at and were like, oh no, I have to wrestle him. It was a good time, man. Those are some fun memories that I have from the old wrestling days and spending time with you guys. I feel like between wrestling and soccer, that was like my community, that was like my group of people, and you're included in that. And I really look back on those days and think highly of them. They were fun.
Yeah, same here.
Well, we were kind of talking a little bit. It's been a really long time, Tom. You were, you were a year ahead of me. So you graduated in 2005 from high school.
Right.
And I graduated 06, and it's been 05, 06, so 13, 14 years now.
Yeah.
Dang.
Really long time.
Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose.
You could say that.
Well, kind of, I'm really interested in kind of what you're up to these days, and I know right out of high school, you went to the University of Chicago, correct?
Right. Correct.
And did you wrestled there when you first went, right? Did you?
I did, yeah. I wrestled. I went there for wrestling. The coach kind of recruited me there. Went there more for the academics, but like I said, I was recruited there by the coach.
Yeah.
And then in my second year, I actually had a friend that I met from my eventual fraternity that got me to do the track there as well. So I did
really?
throws.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. What was that experience like for you?
Just wrestling up there in general?
Yeah, both. Just the athletics and kind of your experience, I guess, at the University of Chicago, and, being a recruit, being somebody who, multi-sport athlete in college, that's pretty special.
So what's special about, University of Chicago, for the sports that I went for, is a D3 school. So it's less... it's still competitive for what it is, but sure. It's more like you're not pushed as hard. I didn't feel like by the community up there and the coaches. You're still pushed, but it's more about what you put into it and how much you want to put into it.
Yeah.
Because people knew that at University of Chicago you were mainly focused on the academics, and this was still, if you wanted to do athletics, you could do it. That being said, it was still more intense than any wrestling practice I had experienced in high school.
Which is,
we were
our practices weren't crazy. The only time that the 1 year that I remember, I think it was my sophomore year, so it would have been your junior year, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he was like he spent like 18 years as like a PT in the Marines. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember his name either, but I know
that was the most
intense
season I think I ever went through.
Do you remember when we did that obstacle course behind his church?
Yes. Oh, shoot. Totally forgot about that.
That was insane. No, he was. I wish he stayed on as a conditioning coach.
Yeah. I definitely say that was one of the most like in shape I felt of maybe any time that I have ever competed in athletics. Like he had us in good shape. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So like just intensity wise, is it the intensity or is it just, college wrestling is just a whole nother level in general. So there's that. And then on top of it, it's, you're a little bit higher stakes in some ways.
Right. As far as the practices go, it's definitely higher intensity because at this point I had been wrestling for since junior high, and most of the collegiate wrestlers have been wrestling since beginning of high school, junior high, even younger than that.
Yeah.
So there's no learning curve. You just basically go in there and you're expected to know basics, and it's just hard from there. And they really push conditioning as well. And so we practiced when we didn't have meets on Saturdays. We practiced 6 days a week, and then we're expected to do gym time and then morning conditionings 3 times a week. So
that sounds pretty intense. That I had the option to go, or the possibility, I guess, to go to where Justin Cox went, one of our other teammates, to McMurray College and wrestle there, and they ended up dropping the program, so I suppose it worked out in the long run. But I don't know, there's part of that for me that by the time I got to senior year, I was tired. Like I couldn't imagine like going and competing in college in some ways, and I don't know, I was pretty set on going to Bethel. I don't know why that was such a draw for me. It's made me who I am today, I suppose, of the college I went to and the friends I've made there, and the relationships have taken me all around the country and to different places, and I met my wife because I went to that college in so many ways, and so looking back, it's clearly the right path for me because I wouldn't be where I am today and talking to you like I am. And but yeah, it's just interesting to think about. I've thought about that before, of like, I wonder what things would have been like. I wonder what it would have, like, how would I have competed? Would I have been competitive? Like, I got a late start in wrestling, in the wrestling world, not joining till freshman year of high school, and I don't know. It was I feel like the wrestling community, the wrestling world in general, is one of those sports that you get out what you put in anyway. And, I think that's what kind of helped me, excel a little maybe quicker than some people. But, I don't know. It's a good sport.
It is. Yeah, definitely. Definitely teaches you a lot of, what's the word?
Life lessons?
I can't think of the word. It teaches a lot of life lessons.
Yeah,
but
character
and accountability is what I was looking for.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
If you don't want to get embarrassed on match day and get your butt pounded on the mat, then you better put in the hard work in the wrestling room.
Yeah, yeah, and that goes into so many different directions. Whether it's put in the work, as in like learn, be disciplined, have that. Make sure you show up on time, have everything you need. There's just so many like little things that I think it teaches. And I've had the privilege of coaching. This is my first year not coaching, like the last 6 years actually. But I coached wrestling in Minnesota at a couple different schools, and dude, I loved it. It was so much fun. It was awesome. And it's really cool to see yourself in some of the kids too, at the high school level. And you're like, man, I was just like you when I was in high school. Like, I'm sorry, like, in so many ways, you're like, I'm sorry, Roy, like, gosh, I'm sorry. No, but also just like the mental aspect of things, I think was the hardest part for me in so many ways. Like, I feel like I was my own roadblock with my mind. I'd get so nervous and get so anxious, and instead of just going out there and letting it fly and having fun, I think I got in my head sometimes. And as I was coaching, I really began to see that, and like working on those relationships and that mental aspect of stuff and that mental toughness, and kind of like setting your mind right and getting guys in the right spot in the right place mentally and physically was I don't know, it was really fun. I really liked the relationship side of things and kind of working on that end of things a lot. That was probably what I enjoyed the most. And it's weird, I was texting my coach, I was co-ed coach with the guy before we left. I moved to Florida, FYI. I live in Florida now.
Yeah, I caught up on that.
I forgot that I may not have told you that. But yeah, so I live in Florida now, and he texted me the other day, and he was like, hey, you want to stay on, we use Huddle. You want to stay on Huddle and check out some Raider wrestling? And I was like, yeah, keep me on, like I'd like to keep involved, and if I can help in any way, like I love breaking down film or watching, so let me know. It's good to feel still connected, and have that relationship and be able to continue to stay in the sport, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
How long did you keep wrestling? How long did you wrestle?
I wrestled all 4 years.
Did you? Nice.
Yeah. I didn't. So I mainly just wrestled for the college. I stopped doing freestyle.
Yeah.
Up there. And yeah, it was pretty intense. I stuck it out all 4 years. In high school, I never really got injured that much.
Yeah.
There was one time I did break my collarbone during a match my freshman year.
I was gonna say I don't remember that, but freshman year
I
wouldn't have been there.
It was toward the end of the season. It was at Mater Dei.
Oh, of course.
And so Mater Dei is a big tournament that we have over the Christmas break.
Yeah. What, like 12 teams or so? Or
12.
12.
I think 12. There's a lot of teams from Indiana that come around.
Yeah.
And it's just a big tournament. And my first year there, I got tossed wrong and landed on my shoulder and ended up. And this is kind of a funny story. I felt it kind of snap and ended up breaking in two places. I couldn't really stand up and shake the guy's arm. And then I went to the stands, and there was a doctor that was in the stands, the seats. It was his day off, and he was looking at me. He's like, "Oh, it doesn't really seem to be broken. You could stay in and watch the rest of the matches at least." Yeah.
Thanks, Doc.
Like I said, it ended up being broken in two places, and it was extremely painful. And I just kind of looked at him like, "Yeah, you should stick to whatever field of medicine you're actually in, and not." But yeah, that was the only time I really got injured in high school. In college, like, it's just more intense.
Yeah.
Like I said, the people who are wrestling at that level are actually want to wrestle and are determined and motivated to do well. Whereas I had run into a lot of guys who just wanted to lean on you and basically do like the fat man dance. In high school, it was more athletic, and so I would run into more injuries in college.
Yeah. That's always a bummer. Like, it's just like one of those things that it's kind of inevitable. You're going to get banged up eventually, but you never really want it to happen. And I guess that's part of the sport and part of any athletics that you play. It's just kind of mitigating some of those injuries and aches and pains and whatnot. But
right. Yep.
How was it being an athlete and balancing, your education and academics as well? What was your major?
My major was in biology.
Biology.
I had started out with the expectation of doing going to medical school, so I was kind of like doing like the pre-med track. I know at some colleges pre-med is like a major or like a track that people do, but
there's different avenues,
wasn't where
right?
we went. And so that was pretty intense stuff, and it was difficult balancing the amount of work that we had with, the practices and basically time management was something I had to learn pretty quickly up there. And then we were on the road a lot during our season, and with being a double sport athlete, eventually, I really had to get to know my professors and talk to them and be like, okay, I'm going to be gone here. Can we work out when I can turn in this assignment, or make sure that all my ducks were in a row before I actually went. Yeah.
Were they pretty flexible with you?
They usually were pretty flexible, as long as because we know our schedules our athletic schedules pretty early on in the semester. So as long as we didn't wait till the last minute to be like, oh, I'm going to be gone, they were pretty easygoing about it.
That's cool. That's awesome. What I'm trying to decide which direction to go right here. I'm going to be honest. Because you finished 4 years. Did you graduate with a biology degree?
I did. Yep. I graduated with a bachelor's in biology.
Nice. And then what did you do after that?
So I took a couple of years off right after that. Because I still wasn't sure if I wanted to do medical school or if I wanted to, or what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I took a couple of years off. Luckily, my last year, I was a resident assistant.
Yeah.
So the way that our housing system worked at Chicago was we had a dorm, and within that dorm, there was usually a resident master who was usually the adult family or whatever that was responsible for the entire dorm, and then resident heads were another college associated adult couple or family.
Sure.
That would be responsible and be like mentors and look out for individual houses within that dorm.
Yeah.
And then we had the student sort of liaisons, which were the resident assistants.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I was. And I got pretty close with the family that I was working with. And so right after I graduated, I kind of stayed with them there as their babysitter or live-in nanny, as they would call me.
Yeah.
So because he was a doctor and she was a therapist.
Okay.
And so I kind of was like using them as mentors.
Great resource, sort of like my career.
Sure. Yeah. So we got to be pretty close for a couple of years, and then about 2 or 3 years later, I wanted to get back into doing research, science research, and so I got a job as a research tech at the university.
Nice.
And I was basically just like a lab manager, keeping mouse colonies in check, setting up mouse breedings, and just keeping track of all of that, and then helping with some of their experiments on the side in that lab. And through that, I kind of figured, so I'd always known that I wanted to do some sort of science, whether it be medical or just like bench research work.
Yeah.
And so I found the other path of where I wanted to go was to do graduate school, but I wasn't sure when or how I wanted to do that yet, because there was another major shift or event that came up, was where I actually lost that job because the professor was leaving the university. He did not get so. A crazy thing about academia is that when you start your professorship, you start out as like an associate professor, I think.
Yeah. And
you're on a tenure track. So after about 5 or 6 years, if you don't get tenure, then you basically have to leave the university or look for another job.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
he didn't
get tenured, is basically.
He didn't get tenure, yeah. So he was closing the lab down, and he had a connection at Indiana University at a lab that was studying infection of the Black Plague bacteria, Yersinia pestis.
Nice.
And so basically I had a similar job there, where I was helping out with some experiments, and I was here on campus in Bloomington. and I just fell more in love in the type of research that I was doing. So I applied to grad school that a couple of years later, or a year and a half later, and am now almost finishing grad school with a PhD in microbiology.
Look at you, Tom. That's awesome. Like it's like anybody that knows you that's listening, I don't think anybody would be surprised. Like you're always such a smart guy, and like one of the most, you just had seemingly, I'm sure you may argue, but you seemingly had your ducks in a row, man. And like I'm really happy to hear that you've continued down that path and you're still kicking butt and taking names, man. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Thank you.
So you mentioned Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, it seemed like to me, it was more like winding road to get to where I am right now.
Sure.
But everybody has their own sort of path when they get here. So
sure. Yeah. And I mean, the more and more, this is, well, I've published to date, I don't know when we'll be publishing this one, but I've published 77 podcasts, and I've got a few banked up for December because I've got some family and some things. My dad's actually in town. He's in the other room right now. But
oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'll spend some time with the family and gonna take a little vacation over the next couple of weeks over the Christmas and holiday time. And I don't know where I was going with that, to be completely honest. But yeah, I know what I was gonna say. So like I'm into the 80s, it'll be like close to 90 podcasts, and it's just a common theme that, everybody's path is like, it's not this direct, directly to whatever you think you're gonna do. Usually it's this, you take your little, side roads and you find your way back and you find your way to where you are today. And I think that's what's kind of cool about stories. And everybody, like, legitimately, I truly believe that everyone has a story and that everyone's story matters, because the uniqueness of how we get to be, who we are today and the people that we are right now. And we'll look back on this moment potentially, and listen to this podcast, in 10 years and go and laugh, because it's funny. It'll be laughable at that point in time.
Yeah.
And if we look back, the same things that were important 10 years ago to us are laughable now in so many ways, but they were important. They're part of our story and they're part of who we are and lead us to where we are. But I don't know. I think that I think that's more common. It's just that journey, it's a little winding road, lots of questioning in our heads of, are we doing the right thing? What direction do we want to go? How do we get to where we want to go? What do we even want to do? Like, where do we want to go? And I don't know. I think that's part of life. You mentioned the mice colonies, and I find that really fascinating. And I understand, and I want to make sure that everybody listening kind of understands the role that plays in some of what you're doing in medical research. And that's mice are commonly used in a lot of the testing, correct?
Correct.
And so part of that isn't just that you go buy mice, it's that you raise them and make them, or you take care of them. You're responsible for creating more and populating your experiments, right?
Correct. Just one clarification. The work that I'm doing right now is just with bacteria.
Cool.
So I can talk a little bit more of that later. But to answer your question, so the mouse colonies that I was working with, or that I was responsible for, we would basically buy what's known as a transgenic mouse, and that's a mouse that we had knocked out a certain gene or a couple of genes, but they were basically genetically the same.
Okay.
And so we needed to maintain those genetic lines. So we're basically keeping those lines pure.
Sure.
For the research we were doing, and then we could also cross them and breed. So if we had an interesting gene knockout of one mouse, which means we basically deleted a gene, we could cross that or breed that with another mouse to get offspring that now had both of those genes
Ah,
deleted and test them in the experiments that we were performing.
sure. Now, why would you want to do that? What would be like the benefit, or what would?
So the research that I was doing up there in Chicago was for testing inflammation, or what causes inflammation during Crohn's disease,
Okay.
or patients with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, which are um, inflammatory problems in the intestines for some people. And so we can look at the effects of certain mutations or genes in mice that have a similarity or are kind of homologous, which means that they're similar to genes that are in the human, and kind of see how they react to certain conditions or certain certain microbes that we might test them with.
Gotcha.
To figure out how these proteins are actually functioning to cause the inflammation or mitigate the inflammation.
Wow. Is it very like, I'm sure everything's very like measured and calculated and more tedious type work?
Yes, I would say definitely.
And like now are these, maybe not this one in particular, maybe you can talk about this with what you're doing now, I don't know, but the results are these like multi-year studies that are going on, that what's the end goal in some ways? Does that make sense?
So for academia, and this goes with what I'm doing right now, the end goal is basically when we start out in our career, we are basically looking for a question that's unanswered in the field or in the literature. And then our goal as graduate students in this so far is to basically answer that question. We find a hole in the reasoning or in the logic and the literature, and we want to basically fill that in.
Yeah.
And so this is it's more of an exploratory pursuit where we may not have a defined, we want to get this drug to market, or we want to decrease this disease occurrence from happening.
Sure.
For academia, it's more of like a what we call basic science, where we're looking more at the mechanistic of, at least for graduate students, we'll mostly get a protein or a gene of interest, and we'll go about characterizing it and figuring out what it's doing, without a defined end goal. Like, okay, I'm doing this research so that I can create this this medicine that will help somebody. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's not, there's a direction, but there's not necessarily an end goal. It's like it's the scientific scientific method in so many ways. It's method. Like, you're like test, reevaluate, and then you adjust your tests based on the response and the results that you get, and that kind of leads the research ultimately.
Right.
Cool. Gotcha. So now if we go into what you're doing now currently, well, first question, did what you were doing at University of Chicago, because you had to transfer, because you switched, did that affect your education? Did that affect your track?
It did, as far as the field that I was in. So at University of Chicago, I was working in digestive diseases, but I was only really a research tech, so I wasn't that far into it.
Yeah.
But if I had gone straight into grad school there, I probably would have been more medical based research. I think it would probably end up being. When I was the tech at Indiana University, is when I switched over to microbiology.
Okay.
So like I said, that lab was studying, or at least the work that I was doing in that lab was looking at the infection, the targeted infection of immune cells by this infectious bacteria. And so I kind of like enjoyed that more, because it was more tied to how how does this bacteria affect the human host that it is causing a disease in.
Gotcha.
So it's still kind of medically on the outskirts of medicine.
Yeah. It's almost backwards to what you were doing before, though, right? Like you're looking at, because with genes, it would be more like the human's response to, or like what's causing. Am I on the right track?
Yeah.
And then like with this, it's like the effect that it has on the human body. So it's kind of like.
Correct. And so what I find more fascinating about it is the aspect of cell-cell communication. So you're looking at, in that lab, we were looking at how the bacterial cell knows the specific immune cell that it wants to target first in order to find the best way to subvert the innate immune system.
Okay.
And cause the most infection.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm tracking.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. That's like, dude, you're a smart guy. I like this. I could sit and like I'm actually genuinely like fascinated and like interested in like how this stuff works. So like
it's awesome. It's awesome stuff.
Yeah, I could never sit down and like read through it and understand probably, but you're doing a great job of dumbing it down so that I can understand. I appreciate that.
Oh, I wouldn't say dumbing it down. I'm just trying to put it in layman's terms. And that's something that
same, but different, you know.
not to get sidetracked, but that's something that I am trying to become better at, because I've noticed that there has been some sort of disconnect between the scientific community and the rest of the world at large.
Sure.
As far as making sure that they understand the kind of research that's going on and why it's important for them to understand it.
Yeah.
And how we can communicate with the general public as far as our science communication comes.
Absolutely. And even just like how, that's why I wanted to kind of dive into, the mice and what that's like, the mice colonies and, kind of how that interacts with science and with the world. I mean, there's intricacies that, that people don't understand and people don't know, or maybe you have heard things, but we don't really get to have someone dive into it unless you want to read a scientific journal or a scientific, article that's been published. And even then, sometimes it's just kind of hard to dissect and hard to like pick out and understand. So I appreciate it. I think it's really fascinating. Personally, I love the understanding systems and understanding the way things operate. And, I think it's cool what you're doing. I think it's cool that you're, in it, it's not just like a guy on the outside. You're like, you're hands-on dealing with these different researches. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So Black Plague is what you're doing now or working specifically with?
So that was before I entered grad school.
Okay.
And that lab actually left right before I started grad school.
But
I decided to stay here in Indiana. But I am studying another disease-causing bacteria.
Okay, cool.
It is called Vibrio cholera, and it causes the disease cholera.
Gotcha.
Which it's a diarrheal disease, and it can cause death in underdeveloped countries that don't have clean drinking water, but it is easily treatable through IV hydration or even just oral hydration.
Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. I didn't know that. So it's a bacteria?
It's a bacteria.
So how does hydration combat cholera?
So basically the problem that cholera causes is it diarrhea. So you lose a lot of water, and it's just a ton and ton of water that you can lose, and you just become dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And, but eventually, these bacteria will leave your system. It's what we call.
Are they flush then? Is that kind of like the mechanism that the body's trying to like flush that out?
It can be looked at as that, yeah.
Sure.
That the body is basically responding to this bacteria, and through this symptom of the infection, it is flushing the bacteria out.
Gotcha.
I can't remember what it's called, but this bacteria, I think it's an obligate pathogen. It doesn't necessarily want to be in your system, but it's in there. Opportunistic. Sorry, it's an opportunistic.
There we go.
Pathogen.
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Which
is fascinating because there's so many different, like, there's parasites that do this. There's like fungus that do this, that do some of those same things, that like they literally attach themselves to bugs, like specific types of bugs that allow them to, they feed off of them until they're ready to like hatch and move on. And, like they're opportunistic. They take advantage of those. Just fascinating.
Right. So yeah, the research that I'm doing isn't necessarily focused on the pathogenesis right now. So it's kind of like I'm getting further and further away from the medical field. But the cool thing about cholera, as well as other bacteria, is that it is able to take up DNA from its environment.
Oh, wow.
And so DNA is kind of like the basic building blocks of what make us up, what makes us us. So it's able to take in DNA from its environment, and if that DNA is similar enough to its genome or its own DNA, it can then recombine that DNA, basically integrate that DNA into itself.
Whoa.
Yeah. So what I mean by if it's similar enough, if it has a sequence, which is a series of the DNA, that is exactly the same as a sequence that's on the genome, it recognizes that, and the process is called recombination.
Okay.
It will anneal to the genome, and then through a process that we don't really understand right now, it kind of kicks out that section from the genome and inserts itself into, not insert itself, there's a process that happens within the bacteria, but it gets inserted into the genome.
So it stays with the person, or is it the reverse?
No, sorry.
The
this
person
is just the bacteria.
Okay.
Right. So we're just focusing on the bacteria.
Gotcha.
The host is out of the picture right now.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what is? I mean, I think you kind of already said this, but you don't know the function or why it really does that.
So there are a couple of theories, and the model that we go off of is that this method of what is called it's a method of horizontal gene transfer, which means that you have a gene from one bacteria, that gene then can be moved over into a completely new bacteria that is somewhat similar or highly similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically a horizontal transfer or a horizontal passing of this gene.
Okay.
And so we believe that this process allows for the accumulation of either a series of mutations or even an entire gene.
What does that mean? I'm not even sure. I don't know if I could even repeat the word.
A series of mutations.
No, the evacuation. Is that what you said?
The accumulation.
Oh, accumulation. Sorry. All right.
Yeah.
I misunderstood you. I thought you said something different, and I was like, whoa, I don't even know what that word is. Accumulation of. Gotcha. Okay.
An accumulation of either a series of mutations or even an entire gene that could increase the fitness of a certain bacteria or a community of bacteria.
Huh. Wow.
And so we think, and there's a lot of evidence for it right now, that this method could be used by bacteria in order to increase their mutation rate and cause antibiotic resistance.
Oh.
And so what we're trying to understand, and a lot of labs are trying to understand, is the mechanistic details of how this occurs and all of the genes and proteins that are involved for allowing this to happen efficiently.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. Does this transfer, I don't know the words. So I was recently talking to a guest and her husband, this could be completely off track, so I apologize, Tom, if it is, but I'm sure you'll understand what I'm saying when I get there. She was talking about her husband has a brain tumor, And one of the ways that they're treating it or have been treating it was they took the polio vaccine minus the polio or like the polio disease minus the polio, and then inserted like the common cold into that gene or that component. I don't know what the words are. And then they injected that into the tumor, and it basically, like the cold or whatever, eats away or feeds on the tumor. And it also helps with like the body's response, that it recognizes the cancer cells because of that, and it helps fight and fight back against the like tumor. Is there any connection there between those two? Because it sounds like there is
some of a connection. Yeah. I'll put it this way. So that sort of genetic engineering can be done in a lab. So like we can manually genetically engineer different viruses with different components to try and treat disease that way.
Okay.
What we're studying is the method, and on a sidetrack, we also are trying to figure out how that these bacteria are able to do this themselves, so that we can use these bacteria as a model and be able to easily create different mutations in different genes to figure out different pathways.
Yeah.
Or different housekeeping pathways or so it's basically we're trying to figure out how these bacteria are able to genetically engineer themselves to acquire different mutations or to acquire novel genes from the environment potentially, so that we can use them for a study, use this in our studies. Okay.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned that it's kind of like pulling you a little further from the medical field. How do you feel about that? Like, is that something you're okay with? Is that taking some time to kind of be okay with, or, what's...
Yeah, I'm pretty fine with it. It's because I viewed my time in grad school as sort of like gathering techniques and how to ask a question and how to set up the experiment to answer that question. So it's not necessarily the substance of the research that I'm doing, but like how I'm able to do the research. Because basically after this 5 years in grad school, that research may lay stagnant until another grad student picks it up, or if the lab continues on with it. But after I leave here, I'm not going to be working on that project anymore.
Right.
I mean, I find the project very interesting, and it's very motivating to answer these questions. But as far as it moving me further away from medicine, I am okay with it, because I know that I can choose a path back to it. And what I mean by that is what I'm focused on is trying to find a lab or find a job that comes back to this area of pathogen versus host, and how those are communicating with each other. And basically using what I've learned as far as genetic engineering and molecular biology in order to answer or pursue those types of questions.
What do you want? Can you answer that at all, or can you speak to that? Like, what is going to be next for you, or what is the direction that you're kind of looking?
So right now I'm looking to move out of academia, which means I don't want to stay in a college research environment. I'm looking to go into industry and into potentially the biomedical field or the bioengineering field. Where they're using these methods of manipulating bacterial or microbe or DNA in order to use for different purposes.
Sure. That's cool. I'm excited to see and listen to and kind of follow along with where you head next. I'm excited. I think it's really cool what you're doing and the things you're a part of, Tom. That's awesome.
Thanks. I'm excited to see where I end up next too.
Hey, we're in that together. We'll see where we are. Like, let's check back in 6 months and a year and See where we're at.
Yeah. And the other pathway that I'm pursuing is just working for the government in sort of an antibiotic. Like, this has been my one kind of ultimate job that I want to do, because I've become so fascinated with how diseases basically work and how they affect the human species. Is to work at a capacity of like sort of anti-bioterrorism, or work for the Department of Health and Human Services, studying diseases. That would be pretty cool, I think, as well.
Yeah. And you said that's something you're like pursuing, or you're involved with now?
That is something I'm pursuing. I'm looking at job openings and positions in government operated labs with the NIH and with the CDC and with the Department of Health and Human Services. Nice.
Are you loving the IU, Indiana, Bloomington area, or are you looking wherever the job takes you?
I'm looking wherever the job takes me.
Yeah. That seems to be kind of how you have to go, especially in that industry, I would say.
Yeah, there are kind of three major hubs. One in Boston, one sort of like in the Carolinas in that area, and then one in
California,
San Francisco in California. Yeah. So I'm mainly looking around Boston. I might try to go back to Chicago. I have. So remember Ben Gettinger?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's out in Denver, and I thought about trying to find a job out there.
Yeah. Didn't he start a brewery?
He did. They started a brewery. They make fantastic beers.
Yeah.
And that's part of the motivating factor for moving to Denver.
Heck yeah.
There's tons of breweries in Denver, but they actually just are about to close their tap room and just go into distribution.
Oh, really?
So
nice. Yep. Have to check that out. I know I saw that he was starting a brewery or started a brewery or was involved with the brewery, and that's about as far as I got.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Colorado would be sweet. Everybody talks highly of it, that area, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful area, that's for sure.
It definitely is.
Boston.
But I was going to say, even though I have a lot of family in Indiana.
Yeah.
This may be like subconsciously self-imposed, but ever since I've been born, I haven't really stayed more than 7 or 8 years in one spot, and so
same.
I would kind of like to leave. I get that itch to leave Indiana and find new locations.
There's value in that, there's a lot of comfort in staying in one place, and I felt the same way when we moved from St. Paul, Minnesota down here about 6 months ago. My home in St. Paul, I had lived there for 6 years, and I had lived there as long as I'd lived anywhere in my life. And there was a lot of comfort there. It felt like home. It was hard to leave because, I had lived there as long as I had lived anywhere. And so it's interesting, but I find a lot of value. Like in those moves, it forces you to not become complacent. And I feel like I did kind of become complacent now that I've moved down here, and I see, I don't know, like just being challenged in different ways, and like having different aspects of like you're forced to kind of like move outside of your comfort zone and not just stay in these same patterns and these same routines. And I think there's value in that. It's not comfortable always, but that doesn't mean it's not beneficial for you,
It definitely makes you very adaptable, I would say.
Yeah.
One downside that I did notice and was that you don't like, I don't know if it's common with people who don't move around a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm terrible at keeping like long distance relationships with friends that I've made over the years.
Likewise, man.
And like because I know that you moved around quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, you make a lot of new friends.
Yeah.
It's just you notice that there are a lot of people who have childhood friends that they've kept through the years.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to develop those kind of friendships when you only know a person for like 7 years.
It really
before you are moved away.
It really is. Yeah, and it's like they just have a purpose for a season. You know, it's like this, like, hey, like I really value the time that I got to spend with you, and it's just hard to stay and keep your mind in one place and then try to grow in another. At least for me, it's like living in two different worlds where it's hard to kind of relate and connect. My only, there's a few people in my life that I've really been able to, keep in touch with and do that. And college, some of my college friends are some of the ones I keep in touch with the most. And, I value those relationships, but yeah, my younger, like high school, we were talking about that. Like, I don't really keep in touch with a whole lot of people from the high school days. And even before that, it's like hit or miss. And, I don't know. That's what I love about the podcast so far. It's been me catching up with old friends, and there's so many people that are like all over the country, and different jobs that I've worked, different places I've lived, and different things, and they're all doing great things, and they're all, have different experiences in life, and I think it's awesome. And I love catching up and like just talking and kind of seeing where people are at and what they're doing, and there's people doing seemingly, these quote what maybe society would say is successful, and there's people that are doing your average job and are happy, and there's no right or wrong answer. There's just no right or wrong answer. And as long as people are kind of pursuing what they want to pursue and working to be in the place that they want to be, and not so focused on what society says is best for us. I feel like I've chased that for a period or a stage in my life, a season in my life, and now it's like, let's figure out what's best, and it's okay to be wherever you are and to be satisfied with, just be trying to live in the present, and not so like, I wish I was here. The grass is always greener on the other side, but it's never really that way when you get there, and we all have our struggles. Well, Tom, we've definitely covered present day and got up to present day, and I love that. I think that's awesome. I would love to take things back a little further, and if we were to look back on your childhood, how would you describe your childhood? What was your childhood like for you?
Sorry, I had to cough.
You're good. I was just saying, what is your childhood? What was your childhood like for you? How would you describe your childhood?
It was an eventful childhood. I grew up as one of 5 boys.
Sure.
In a military household. So both of my parents were Marines, and
there were five Nero boys?
There were five Nero boys.
Man, I didn't know that. How did I not know that?
Yeah. Because you probably only met 2.
Yeah.
2 besides me, Bobby and Larry.
Yeah.
And those were the youngest 3. And the other 2 were out of the house before you came into the picture.
Do you have a sister as well?
No.
I
just 5 boys.
5 boys. That's it. Cool.
Yep. And then the earliest I can remember, we were in Okinawa, Japan.
Right.
And so my mom was stationed there, and my dad was working. As a family, we were there, and my dad was working in the officer clubs on the bases there.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely not a typical childhood. We went to school in one of the Department of Education schools, so it wasn't necessarily with the Okinawans.
Yeah.
We went to school with other military kids.
Right.
But I would say during that time, all of us boys were pretty crazy, and I have to give a lot of credit to my parents for keeping us in line and not going too far off the deep end.
Yes, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Yeah.
So schooling was with other people that were on the base.
Correct. Yeah.
How long were you in Japan? How much of your childhood was there, and what was that experience like? Looking back, what was that experience like for you?
I was there from the age of 2 until about the age of, I want to say 9 or 10.
Nice. A good chunk of time then.
A very good chunk of time. And it's hard to remember because I'm so old now.
I know. I know, man. I know. I just had a birthday. I get it. I'm old too. I'm in my 30s.
Oh, happy belated birthday.
Thanks. No worries.
So my experience in Okinawa, I look back on it very fondly, just because, I mean, you were talking earlier about how you love the beach, and there's just a smell and like an atmosphere.
Yeah.
For me, that's how I remember Okinawa. Is just there's just this atmosphere, because it was an island and we weren't that far from the beach. Our school was right on the beach, and I would actually attribute my love and passion for science to that school. I was only there. I went there for preschool through 3rd grade.
Okay.
But as I got up into like the 1st and 2nd grade, there was sort of like gifted and talented program, and basically it was more in the STEM, so the science and technology and mathematics field. And I remember, I was thinking about this the other day. I remember one of the things that we did, we got involved with sort of like creativity and innovation, and we had to invent our own like product to sell. It never actually went as far as selling it.
Sure.
But I remember I designed a all-in-one toothbrush that dispensed mouthwash and a toothpaste, as well as functioned as a toothbrush.
Nice.
And also had a flip-out pick.
Oh, so you could pick your teeth. Yeah, that's awesome. What
so
a cool thing!
Like that.
What a cool thing! Like as a kid, like it's getting the brain thinking and like trying to get you to like process, systems and think through different things. I like that. That's really cool. That's a fun project.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, what was your question going to be?
Oh, I was gonna ask about just your favorite memory or your most fond memory from, your time in Japan, your time in school, or do you have any memories that stick out to you from that time period?
I have a couple of memories. I don't know. I have a hard time saying anything is like a favorite memory.
I know. I do too. I try to phrase it differently because favorite anything or like number one or best or whatever. It's like the first thing that pops in your head, I feel like sometimes those are like the best ones. There's like these, what's the one that like comes to mind?
Comes to mind. Yeah. No, I felt like I was more adventurous and more like exploring as a youngster in Okinawa. And what I mean by that is I felt safe enough to go out into the woods near our house, where we call them the boonies, but we go out and just like explore the woods or play around the woods or go by ourselves to play in a local boggy area or a swamp area and chase frogs and everything.
Yeah.
And of course, what happens is you grow up and you have more responsibilities, and then you get to do that sort of things. But no, it was the area around the neighborhood around our house. It was easy to make friends, and it was easy to find things to do and explore.
Yeah.
So that's what I probably like most about living in Okinawa.
Yeah. Did you learn any Japanese?
So we did I want to say 2nd and 3rd grade. They actually taught Japanese culture and Japanese language.
That's cool.
I don't know anything right now more than basic.
Yeah.
Basic things like counting and
It's like a
things
use it or lose it. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
But it
Exactly.
probably, like, even thinking back of, there's different research and science behind, like, introducing your kids to another language at a young age and how it affects the brain and how it, I wonder what that would look like, like how that affected you long term,
Yeah, that would be interesting to know.
It's hard
I
to
definitely
tell.
think growing up that way, it was a more diverse community. I would say that.
Yeah.
And so you're already introduced to having more, or open to more cultures and different ideas than what you might, and who knows how many, embedded cultural ideas I had at the age of 8. But
yeah.
You see that you kind of see that the world is bigger, and I think that that definitely impacted my way of thinking about things. Because going from that sort of environment to a small town in the Midwest, that is not very diverse.
Nope.
It's sort of like a cultural shock.
Sure.
Even though I don't look any different from these people.
Yeah. But you just had a different upbringing. It was different.
A different perspective and a different,
perspective for sure. So what grade were you when you moved to the Midwest from Japan?
It was 4th grade.
4th grade.
Yeah.
So you jumped in 4th grade. See, I moved within the Midwest, but from Indiana to Illinois, then back from Illinois to Indiana. But it was 1st grade. So I went from, Indiana when I was like 2 to Illinois, and then we moved when we were in Illinois to another place in southern Illinois, Charleston. So it was like midway through my 1st grade year. So it was like 1st grade till 6th grade. I was, at this school in Illinois, and in Charleston, Illinois, where EIU is, the Eastern Illinois University. And then I moved to Sullivan, where, we went to school together. And both were different experiences. But I think it's interesting, and this is where I'm getting at. I'm the long way to get there, but I'll get there. Trust me.
Yeah.
I feel like growing up in elementary school, pretty much all of my elementary school years in this one school, I knew everybody, that was there. It wasn't a big town. It wasn't a big, school or anything. I knew my peers, and we just got along, and it was fine. It was good. Like you knew who the other person was. Like we played sports together. We played, we went to school together all 6 years, and like, I don't know, there was just this camaraderie. There was just this acceptance of like, these are my friends. These are my people. And even if I wasn't close with them, you just knew each other. You had this mutual respect. And then moving to Sullivan, it was different. And I attribute some of it to, like, one, I think Sullivan is just kind of this way. It's a little cliquey, there's little pockets of people. It's middle school. So 7th grade, 8th grade, it's just a rough year for anybody in life, and a rough time potentially. And then I don't know, I think it's just moving and being the new person and like trying to define yourself, reassert yourself into that, like, into society in some ways, like, and you don't know anybody and you're young and you're trying to like assimilate, but it was hard. It was a really rough transition for me. And I think middle school had a lot to do with that and just that time, that age range. But that was a tough change. I went from, it was a lot of like, again, maybe it's for the better, but there's this one memory that I have that I got picked on a lot in middle school. And one time I wore a turtleneck to school, and though as funny as that might sound, I never wore a turtleneck again. I got razzed and teased, and it wasn't anything I ever thought about. Like, I didn't think about what I wore, before then. It was just, I went to school and I did my thing, and it wasn't a matter of like, that was just Shane. There's Shane, But then going to a new school, I realized that it was like, oh, there's different things. It was a eye-opening experience, and it changed my perspective for sure, and good and bad behind that. Did you have any experiences like that? Like coming, obviously it's just fourth grade is an interesting time too, and it's kind of right in the middle, very developmentally kind of growing and trying to figure your life out and figure yourself out. But
it is. So in elementary and middle school, I was chubby. I was fat.
Sure.
And I may or may not have been effeminate in my vocalizations or attitude. I don't know. But like you get called names and everything. And
sure.
It just depends on your attitude. I try to be friendly with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But after junior high, after puberty, where I kind of shot up and got to be pretty big.
Yeah.
I never really had any issues with anybody, whether or not they were scared or or what. But
I wouldn't have seriously picked on you.
You wouldn't have seriously come after me, but
no.
Yeah.
I tugged on that tail enough, or picked on that tiger, poked that tiger enough to know, like, I didn't want any of that. Whenever I crossed that line, when you'd let me know when I was out of line.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Luckily
that makes sense.
People,
and
no one ever made me cross that line.
Yeah.
I'd hate to see what would happen.
Me too. Me too. No, it's interesting because I feel this similarly. Getting to high school, it was a different animal for me, and I think for me at least, it went from I was no longer the low man on the totem pole. We were kind of all thrown into the deep end, and it was I found my group in athletics and sports, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, outside of the wrestlers in the room, not many people picked on us as wrestlers anyway. And I think that helped for sure.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't hurt anything.
No.
But yeah, interesting. I have several friends that have had different, upbringings and different cultures and different, whether their parents were, missionaries or in the military or, overseas. And it's just interesting to hear their perspectives on coming back. And you came at a younger age, and I'm sure that helped in some ways of, some of that. Not that it didn't have its challenges, but I'm sure, moving at a younger age has its pros and cons for sure, and affects you differently. No. But
I definitely agree. Like, I think that children are more friendly and inviting at a younger age.
Yeah.
But then in junior high, you're right. They do become really cliquey and a little bit more selective in who they will welcome and talk to.
Yeah. Why is that? What do you think what's the deal? Is it just hormones?
We become more, I think I'll say we, but I think that we become more self-aware of themselves and who they hang out with and what they look like and how their social interactions will affect their street cred.
Sure.
So they become more judgmental and more selective, I would say.
Yeah. That makes sense. Were you interested in like athletics when you were younger, or like what were some of your interests outside of, school, or did you playing with the frogs in the swamp?
Yeah, playing with the frogs in the swamp. In Okinawa, so the athletics for me, other than swimming a little bit, didn't really start until Little League baseball. I think it was like 5th or 6th grade.
Sure.
And then I played football or basketball, like basketball in middle school, and football started in junior high. I guess that's a lie. We had bitty football, but the real football didn't start until junior high. And I don't think I started wrestling until my 8th grade year.
Okay.
And it was basically because my dad was like, oh, you should try this out. So 3 out of my 4 brothers at that point had wrestled.
Yeah.
And so Bobby was too young, so he couldn't wrestle yet.
Yeah.
And so my dad was like, oh, try this out. It'll keep you active and athletic. And basically, like you were saying earlier, a lot earlier, is that in a small town, I don't know if you said this on this podcast or another one. I might be remembering another one. But in a small town, there's not much to do outside of like school and athletics unless you have a job or
Right.
it's no good.
Yeah.
So I think my parents were trying to get us all as active and fill up our time as much as possible.
Mm.
Yeah.
It was definitely, when I think about that, yeah, and I don't know, like, I don't know any different. I don't know any better. I don't know what it's like to go to a big school in the city. Like, I couldn't imagine what that's like. It seems way more complicated and difficult than what you and I, experience. But I kind of like the idea of the small town, school type mentality in so many ways. I've coached at some bigger schools, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about this on other podcasts, but we had pride in our athletics, in what we did, in our extracurriculars, and not just athletics. It was whatever it was, like any extracurricular. There was, people are quick to like be like, look what Tom did, look what Shane did, and I think I thrived off of that. And maybe it's some of it came from my experience in middle school. I'm not really very shy about it. I very much believe I was bullied quite a bit, and I really desperately wanted to fit in. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to fit in, and I don't know if that was the way I found my acceptance, is like through my athletics. And so I just like was thirsty for that, and continued to put my time into that, because that's where I got my I don't know, where I fit in and where I got my accolades or whatever. But I love that. I love coming in on a Monday morning and being like, Shane placed, 3rd or 1st at the whatever North Knox Invitational this weekend.
Yeah.
Like, or Shane, Tommy, and, whatever, like we placed whatever. Like, I love that. Like that, I live for that. I love that. I loved getting that, like, kudos, and having your class kind of look at you like, nice job, or like a professor or a teacher coming up to you and being like, good job this weekend. Thanks. Like, I love that. That's all I wanted. And
yeah. And I think that's one of the major benefits of going to a smaller school, is that basically you're a tight community. Everybody, at least everybody in their own grade, knows each other.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit more difficult as you move out to the farther grades, but almost everybody knows everybody. And so it can be really supportive that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of negatives, right? I mean, the small town, everybody knows everybody's business and whatever.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I loved it. I think I look back on that and I really appreciate that. And look, coaching at some of these bigger schools where you've got thousands of students at these schools, and I think that's what it's lacking in so many ways, is like, there's just not pride in your extracurriculars. Why would you want to go? Like, what drives you to go wrestle, like, other than a friend that's doing it, or a family member that's done it, or, some people, will be adventurous and be like, hey, I'm going to give this a try. But man, it's hard. And I think that sometimes it's those kudos, it's those people that when you get up and say like, hey, the band, our choir or our band team is performing at the such and such parade this weekend, make sure you support them. Like, what's wrong with saying that? What's wrong with taking that time? That's just as important as all the other things that are going on. But I think that some of the bigger schools operate more like, because there's so many people and they're so maybe understaffed in some ways and overworked, that it's just, it falls to the wayside. That's not important. And I think it should be. I think it needs to be. I'm going to get off my soapbox now, Tom, but that's just something I believe.
No, I definitely agree with you 100%. Like, I don't know, unless I got the community support, if I would have stayed with wrestling or football, because I wasn't just an athlete. I was really into academics as well in high school.
Yes.
Not only did I do football, wrestling, and track and field, but I also participated on the Spellbowl team and the Science Olympiad team and Data Club and all of that.
Yep.
Were you? And I just
what play? I mean, were you in the? You were in the top of your class though, weren't you? As well? Did you?
Yeah, I was. The top? I think 9th or 8th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were involved in a lot of academia, and athletics. Like you played football, you wrestled, you did track and field. So, your time was
filled.
Filled, yeah. It was in high demand for sure.
But no, it definitely takes like the community to get involved with that and to be supportive.
Yeah. And that's with anything. I mean, it doesn't matter if the people you surround yourself aren't supportive of the things you're doing, and it loses its flavor. Like we're not meant to be just a man on an island, like no man is an island. They're like, legitimately though, like we thrive off other people, and you can have your own motivations. That's fine. And most people do. And you should. I think you should be an independent individual, but we still are affected by the people that we surround ourselves with. And I don't know. That's just one of my critiques of some of the bigger schools that I've coached at and been around. And I completely agree. I think, those pressures and those social pressures and those different things motivated me. Like I wanted to be considered that. That was a motivation to me. Like I want to rise to the top. I want to be the best I can. I want to have those pats on the backs and those nice jobs. Like I lived off that. And in some ways I still do, I appreciate this.
Definitely.
What did you say you wanted to be when you grew up?
When I grew up, I knew I wanted to be, like I said, in the science field, but mostly I wanted to be an astronaut.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Like even from a young age, like early on,
you're like, from a pretty young age, I wanted to be an astronaut doing research in space.
Nice. Did you ever, you ended up going to the University of Chicago to wrestle, and obviously academics were great there. Did you consider going to the military?
I had considered it.
Because you're at least one of your older brothers, right? He went into the military.
Yes.
And your family, obviously, and you're growing up, so.
Yeah, so I had considered it, and I knew that I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
And sort of, my parents had kind of, like I said, were both Marines, and they had put, for me at least, academics first. And when I was choosing colleges to go to, I thought I might try and get into one of the military academies. And in order to apply for those academies, you need a recommendation from like a state senator.
Right. Yeah.
And so I went to one of those recommendation days and interviewed with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I had only really wanted to interview with the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
But they also set me up with the Naval Academy.
Mm.
Long story short, I did not end up getting a recommendation from the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
But found out too late that they actually recommended me for the Naval Academy.
Ah, and you'd already accepted.
Yeah.
Would you have gone that direction, you think?
I might have.
Yeah. Hard to tell.
Well, so at the time, my idea, like I said, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to work at NASA.
Yeah.
And so I had this sort of sense, being in a military family, of duty to serve, but like that was the only way I was going to be able to do that, was to get into the military service and then work my way up to as a scientist to get to NASA.
Sure. That's cool. I like that. I mean, this is the path, the winding road that you took to get to where you are.
the winding road that I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah. It's such a tough place to be in high school, and coming out, there's such a pressure to like know what's next and know what to do and what direction to go, and I don't know, there's so many pressures. I feel like that I don't envy people, especially nowadays. Like there's so many options, like with the way technology's gone, and man, there's so many different options to go, and we expect kids and we expect people to know what they're supposed to do and what they want to do for the rest of their life. And I think there's a little too much pressure sometimes put on that next step versus maybe a little more exploration of like finding the right path,
Right. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I also think that they're like people. So in high school or in junior high, people always ask, like, what do you want to do next? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And that's where the pressure comes from.
Right.
But I think that there's a downfall with when the answer is given, like say, oh, I want to be a doctor, or, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to work as a safety officer in a coal mine, or I want to work as a scientist at a power plant. There's no next step.
Right.
Like it's just
like,
that's
cool.
the answer.
Good luck. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, how am I going to do this? How are we going to get you to where you want to be? Like what kind of path do you need to take?
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I were talking about this she was a psychology major, and, was interested in counseling and different things as like post-grad, and she ended up not going, she hasn't done that yet. It's still something on the docket, but, it's like, what do you do with a psychology major, and like degree? Like, what do you do? Like, it's really built to go back to school. It's not built to be a standalone thing, and we were talking, I was like, what would you, like if we have kids and they like want to major in psychology, like, what would you say to them? Or like, what do you want to, she's like, well, it's their choice, like I'm not gonna, obviously whatever. And I was like, I hear you completely, but I would like at least encourage them to get a minor in something else that they're interested in, like, yes, it might take you a little longer, but like have something that if you get to the end of that psychology degree, you've got another route to go, like just give yourself an out, give yourself some options. And because a lot changes in 4 years, a lot changes during that time. And I don't know, I just think, whether it's get psychology and have a business minor, why not? Like it doesn't hurt anything, like,
right.
I don't know, find something else that's more like that you're interested in as well. I love the idea of taking a year off, interning somewhere, and if you want to be a scientist at a power plant, like just go work at the power plant, just see how it works, see the ins and outs, talk to people, and like learn how that industry is. If you want to be a doctor, like be a front desk person, like answer phones, but you get to see how the office runs, how the environment is, what people are doing. You get to ask those questions. And I think that's maybe a component that we're missing. And they try to shove that stuff in high school, but it doesn't really work. I don't know.
High school is mainly just to get you to graduate.
Yeah.
Like if there's a few talented students, they'll probably like, oh, well, here's where you can go.
Yeah.
Or try to get you into the best place that they can get you into. But
sure.
It's basically, I see it as they just want to make sure that you graduate.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I guess that's important too. But I don't know.
But I mean, all
There's
of it
so
comes
much more
down to like experience. So like,
sure, yeah, exactly.
They're not. I don't think that they're using proper resources. And this sounds super critical, and I'm not. I'm just like voicing my opinion here.
Yeah.
But they may not have the resources to bring people in and explain.
Very true.
Okay, if you want to be a psychologist or a physical therapist or a doctor, here's what you need to start doing now, or here's what you should expect your path to be like. Mm-hmm. And and it comes with some cautions as well, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Like, you don't want to have students get so locked in on something that they think that they definitely want to do that they don't take the time when they go to a new environment to explore and figure out, oh, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah.
Or is it something else?
And get, 10 years down the road and go like, what did I do that for? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm miserable. I hate this. Well, Tom, we're running low on time. I've got a few questions to kind of close this out. You ready?
Okay.
Speed round.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of to date?
Most proud of being the first in my family to graduate from college.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. Congratulations. And not only graduate from college, but you almost have your PhD.
Almost have my PhD, yeah.
Dude, that's rad. That's awesome. That's so cool. We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what are you looking forward to most in the future? Do you have any goals and ambitions?
My goal is to have a good job and start to build, a family and a life.
Yeah.
That I've kind of like just been putting on hold.
Sure.
Be able to spend more time with my family.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to be comfortable enough to see the world, because I haven't really been able to go and see the world, but I definitely want to go and travel at some point. So just being in a place where I can comfortably do that.
Not that Florida is the world, but please come visit me anytime. We have a space for you, and
it's ocean. Oh, I love the ocean.
Yeah,
so
dude,
definitely.
I'm down. Come visit. I'm serious, dead serious. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about your legacy?
I sometimes do, which is like tied into why I'm ready to leave school and start a job and become comfortable. Because like I want to be able to have a family and raise kids that to have a similar mindset to what I've been able to acquire through the years. And I feel like I have somewhat of a legacy, whether or not it's remembered. It's remembered by me at Sullivan and with the people that I've met there and made friends with there.
For sure.
I guess other than that, I'm not really concerned with
which is
necessarily
fair.
what I leave behind. I know that in my daily life, I try to be positive.
Yeah.
And whether or not that leaves an impact, I don't know. Who can say?
I don't know if it's us to say, I think the only thing we can do is try to be the best that we can be. And my father-in-law wisely told me a few weeks ago when he was visiting, he's like, you can only strive to be better than you were yesterday. And that's great. I really believe that. I really like that. It stuck with me. All right. Last question. Looking back, what advice would you tell little Tom?
And you kind of struck on this, whether or not you intended to or not, but that no man is an island. Like, no matter what you're feeling, what you're going through, how you feel, like your likes, your dislikes, you're not alone. Like, they may not be in the immediate vicinity, but there are people that have the same feelings and the same likes and the same ideas that you do. You just have to find your family in that aspect of things.
I love that. Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this has been fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, likewise. I'm going to close this out now, all right?
Okay.
All right, thank you all so much for listening. Please visit on Facebook and Instagram where you can like and comment on our posts. If you want to go above and beyond, please share the CrazyFaceUno Podcast with your friends and family or just random strangers on the street. Welcome to everyone. Once again, please visit CrazyFaceUno.com to purchase our merchandise and donate. Your contributions help us tell more stories like Tom's and stories just like yours. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you all. Love you. Peace.